We are rolling right now. If you could just start off with just say and spell your name and how you'd like to be addressed.
Bob Prillaman, P as in Paul, Rillaman.
And your title, what you do?
I'm just retired. I was a senior officer of Caristar Industries, chairman of the board of a number of companies, Sweetwater Paperboard and Camden, all headquartered out of Austell, Georgia, and president of 4 companies that were in the recycling field primarily.
Okay. When people look at Cobb County today, what do you think your role in the history of the county is, and what are some of the key events and key people from your time as a mover and shaker in Cobb County?
Oh boy, what a pleasure it has been to be a part of so many exceptional people whose efforts actually defines the excellence of Cobb County. I guess as a player, I would suggest that my role was being a part of Wellstar Health System and KSU. But let me clear the air by saying my pleasure, my indeed passion has been over the years and continues is being able to participate with people such as the leaders in this community. We could name them and list them and list their areas of expertise. Some that have never really had the credit they should have. Tom Phillips would be one that I I'd put him number one, and he would really be upset with me if he knew I was saying this. Most confident man, very private man. He was instrumental in helping Wellstar and KSU form what is now the number 1 nursing school in the state of Georgia. He was a major factor in it. He's a man who the new addition at Kennestone is named for Tom and Betty Phillips. He's a man who made a visit to hospice for the first time and decided he would fund all of the furniture and specialized equipment in that hospice. And then as you go on down the list, I look at the people at Wellstar, I look at the people at KSU who cared and who responded and knew what to do without any fanfare for themselves to merge a university that now has 36,000 students to the largest health system in the state of Georgia. We forget that happened in Cobb County. And why did it happen? Oh, it's really easy. It was because of the wonderful people who cared and who worked together. And I can give you a good example of that. My first hospital experience was on the board at Cobb Hospital. I worked in South Cobb. Cobb Hospital was there, and I went on that board. And we were competing with Kennestone Hospital in Marietta. I lived within a rock's throw of Kennestone, and my every effort was to do anything I could to compete with them. It was ridiculous. Here we are in one of the most affluent counties in Georgia by any stretch of imagination, and with the effort of the Board of Trustees at Cobb Hospital, with the effort of the Board of Trustees at Kennestone, we sat down, we considered, and said, this is ridiculous. we need to be together. We don't need to be competing when we're discussing something as valuable to every human being as health care. And from this meeting and from the wonderful people, the Chet Austins, the Mac Hendersons, many of these Sam Hensley, all these people on both sides, the Kennestone and the Cobb, formed this alliance that saved this county buckets of money, gave quality health care, was a success from a monetary point of view, which relates to having the best equipment, the best scanners, the best doctors. And that in itself, to me, is just one of the areas where you see that people in Cobb County cared and that they could work together without worrying about who gets credit or where my name should apply. They wanted to do the right thing, and they did. So I would put the Wellstar Kennestone in the number one category, not just for the fact that it's wonderful health care, quality health care, but look at the economic impact. Look at the physicians, the headquarters here in Cobb County, for, as I had mentioned, the largest health system. Just tremendous, something that is valuable now and will be for generations to come.
Can you talk a little bit about that meeting that you mentioned? Like, who were the two sides of that meeting, and kind of, can you take us into the room and tell me kind of?
Yeah, yes, I can describe it this way. Most of us who were on the boards were rather competitive businessmen. We wanted to win. And if we were on a board, we felt that had to be the best board because we were on it and our friends were on it. And so we felt that we had to compete with Kennestone. It was our major competitor. But as time went on, healthcare was becoming costly. Lord, we all know about that now. And we had people who could openly discuss things, even, I might say, with a competitor, just to get to the bottom line on it. And I can recall several meetings where we were looking at doing something together. I'm talking about Wellstar, what is Wellstar now was then Kennestone and Cobb. And I need to give credit to two people here. Richard Hubbard was the administrator at Cobb Hospital. Bernie Brown was the administrator at Kennestone. And they were, of course, competitors. That's what their job was. And somehow in a discussion over maybe joining together for a laundry that we both would be partners in, we started discussing among ourselves, this makes so much sense. And then, and I don't know who to give it credit on this to. I don't recall who it was. It wasn't me. I wish it had been me. But someone said, something like a laundry saves a lot of money, and here we are, two health systems serving the same public, both authority hospitals. And we're competing, and this money could be going into buying the best equipment, growth, responding to healthcare needs. And with that, a discussion began, and I can recall that first meeting was not an easy meeting. Obviously, Kennestone was larger than Cobb Hospital. And it came down to a rather heated discussion on who would make up the board. And Cobb, we insisted that we have an equal number of board members. And to my surprise and to my pleasure, and really enhancing my opinion of the good people in this county. They agreed to that. And that was, I think, the final effort. Now, don't get me wrong, there were so many wonderful people that made this happen. Dr. Paul Payne would be one. He was a board member at Kennestone, and he, as a physician, could see the value, and he was influential in it, as many others, community leaders, were. And I can't imagine anything more dramatic or useful, for lack of a proper term, than combining these and saving that money and putting these funds back into valuable assets for the community.
Cool. David, you want to come in?
He's out there drinking wine, probably.
Okay. What were the most critical periods of Cobb's history that shaped it, and why were they critical? What was important about them?
I would like to give credit to someone who really I didn't know, but I have heard so many people talk about him, express gratitude for his foresight, for his actions, none self-serving, but of great value. Ernest Barrett, who was Cobb County Chair Commissioner a number of years ago, during the early stages of what we call the modern Cobb County. He had a vision. I can't tell you anything about it. I didn't know him that well. But he had a vision of understanding that when you do something, do it right, and don't do it just for the immediate. Do it for the future in mind. So here we go. What did he do? Well, he kept the county basically out of debt. When he put in water and sewage, he put in a water and sewage system that was admired throughout the United States. I had the great pleasure over the years of speaking to the bond people on rating the bonds and their value. And our value is extremely high with our water and our sewage. And a great deal of that can be traced back to Ernest Barrett. And I've talked to people who knew him and knew of his visions, and all of them pretty much have the same old country saying about him. He was a man that knew what was the right thing to do and pushed it even when it was not something that was going to be popular or perhaps wasn't even the greatest thing politically. But if he knew it was the right thing and it did look at and consider the future generations to come, he made Cobb County special, and it reflects in the bond ratings very high, and that started with him. And we've had great commissioners. I've tried to support every commissioner, whether I voted for them or not, when they were elected, because hey, that's what you need to do. You shouldn't carry over a party. I'm sick and tired of I'm a Republican and I'm a Democrat. What you should be, if you're serving the people and if you're responding to those elected, is to work with them. And we had that starting with Ernest Barrett. I think that set the tone for others to follow.
So you said you didn't know him that well, or really kind of know him at all. But hey, you want to come in?
Yeah. Trade off. Oh, I gotta go sit in the chair. One with that. Now you got a real person looking.
Oh my
Stuck in a chair.
goodness. Yeah,
Oh, they're
yeah.
Real similar.
Yeah.
They're real similar.
What was you asking?
Which one?
What I was going to ask was, you talked about Ernest Bear, you didn't know him so well. What are some people that you did know really well, both as kind of friends and allies, and both as not necessarily enemies, but kind of adversaries or rivals? And do you have any stories about those kind of encounters?
I'll ask you another way because I wrote almost the same thing. Who are the top 3 or 4 people that you admire the most and why?
Certainly, I would start with Tom Phillips. Most unusual person that I've had the pleasure of knowing when it comes to community involvement in my life. He's a man that didn't have the money really to go to college, but found a way to work his way through. Then he found a way to be very, very successful. And that's a great story. But that's the beginning of this man. That's just where it starts. Here's a man that if you go to a number of restaurants, even to this day in this Cobb area, you will find students reporting in each quarter to get their money to go back to school the next quarter. You will see he and his wife Betty's name on the new extension. He's a man that I'd mentioned earlier that I wanted to know why he was joining the board at Wellstar, and I took him to hospice, and he ended up buying all the equipment and giving it to him that day. He's a man who makes sure that his, what I call just a paradise up in North Georgia, lakes and this sort of thing, that 3.5 miles of trout stream, that kids and churches have use of this. He's a man that I asked him one night why he didn't give his money through foundations and this thing, and his answer was, I don't give money for tax purposes. I give money for those kids. And I don't want to be regulated with what they have to do or know or what family they must come from to get an education. That's exceptional. You just don't see that much at all. So he certainly is a man that I admired so much. I guess if I go further, I would put in that category Roy Barnes. Now, I'm a conservative Republican, and he's a doggone good Democrat for sure. But I admire him. This would be the biggest surprise of his life. He ever knew I said this, but I've always admired him for several reasons. One, God made him brilliant. He is a brilliant attorney with a brilliant mind. And anybody that doesn't see that, they're just not looking. It's there. He's used it well. Now, I don't know, and somebody smarter than I am would have to tell you, but I think that we getting open heart surgery at Kennestone some years ago was in part to his efforts. I really do think that he was behind that scenes and now one of the most successful around. Though he's just one of those people that you've got to find him exceptional. And then I guess the one I would have to put in this would be Jim Dalton. Again, nobody really knows that much about him. But he was the one that went on to become, had much to do with what Curastar became. And he was from an affluent, successful family. His father was chairman of the board, I think, of 6 or 8 major companies. And, you would think that would be an influential thing. All he loved was the meals. He loved to come in on the weekends He knew everybody in the mill. He took everybody to Six Flags, and he spent the first 2 months before we went to Six Flags memorizing names, and he kept a record of the family so that he could call them by name when he saw them there. I never asked any participation. He helped me in major fund drives, KSU, the scholarships, many of the scholarships there that bear my name, he gave them. He did so many things that just there was no reason for it, but he did them. And this county is so much better for him and what he did, because you can't. I could start with anything I've ever been a part of: Heartball, cancer, or the Salvation Army. I headed up for that building. First guy in line was him. It's just amazing that that you can be around those. So what's the value of it with these people? And you could go on and on. We're seeing something there that if one is young enough and starting out, there is so much to be learned from these folks and their intricate part. Caristar probably at one time supported more projects in Cobb County than any other business. So I would put him in that list.
How are we on? You got plenty of stories, so we're getting ready to talk about one that's
reframed.
that's big time. We'll talk about Wellstar.
We're good.
Yeah.
How it started, its role. You're the only one that can tell that story really well. So I'm just basically, let me start it. So Bob, Wellstar today is the largest hospital system in Georgia. It's ranked in the top 25 in the nation. It's in the 100 best places to work in America.
Yes.
Considering all industries. But tell us how it started and who the key players were that made this system who it is today.
Oh, that's a good one. I started at Cobb Hospital on their board because our company was there. And this was an education for me, and I'm going to be careful not to use names or anything, but I'm going to say this. My involvement in healthcare was strange, to say the least. The administrator of Cobb at that time, Richard Hubbard, excellent guy, went on to become the administrator at Piedmont. He and I were Rotarians together, and he had mentioned the problem he had with a commissioner. And I, not knowing anything about healthcare or commissioners for that matter at that stage of my life, I just went over to the commissioner's office, and I thought it was the proper thing to do to tell him he was wrong. And I got escorted out of my first visit in Cobb County to the Cobb County Commissioners. They didn't call the police, but they made sure that I left. And I'm not sure what they said after I left, but I didn't feel comfortable going back again, if you want to know the truth. And the oddest thing that happened was the very person that, well, there's no other way to call it, sort of kicked me out. I mean, I'd love to find, there'd be a better term I'm sure somebody could come up with, but I got kicked out. That's it. Called me the next day. And he said, I've been thinking about it. And he said, would you like to be on the authority? Of course, I didn't know what the authority was, but I'm sure I wanted to be on it. And so I told him, yes, I'd like to be on the authority. It's a terrible story. But anyway, that's how I got started. And I learned almost immediately that even though I lived close to Kennestone, that there was a war going on between Kennestone Hospital and Cobb Hospital, both not that major in the playing field at that time. At Cobb Hospital, there were tremendous people who made it happen. Pete Woods, special person if there's ever been one. His abilities with accounting was great for Cobb Hospital. Dr. Richard Hammonds, they both now have passed on. Physician in South Cobb, better known to many as a leader for healthcare under the Jimmy Carter administration. They were instrumental in this. We had on those boards the Mac Hendersons. Chet Austin went on to become chair of Cobb Hospital. And Tom Hill, who was a chair here at the chamber, worked directly for Richard Hubbard. And there began the war, and it was a war of skills. All of the skills that we had or didn't have in business became obvious because if we put up a doctor's office somewhere, you could bet Kennestone would be putting one up very close to compete, and we were doing the same thing. And this went on, for a long time. Now, I knew people on the other side of that, under Bernie Brown's leadership at Kennestone, the wonderful physicians that I admired so much, knew them well, and of course board members like Sam Hensley just gave whatever they had to it. It was so important to them. And people like that, well, we were friends in so many areas, working on other projects together, except healthcare. And I mean, we were a little foolish in ways that we went after each other. I mean, it was not pleasant, but it was very, very competitive. You'd like to say that we were friendly competitors. We weren't friendly competitors. It was a little bit of a war. And it went on and on and on, and as I'd mentioned earlier, we knew that healthcare was changing because and I was one of those, I became absolutely fascinated with healthcare. And I started reading everything I could find about it. I just thought, wow, this is something. And I guess it went back to, as a kid, we didn't have any money. We lived up in the mountains, and I had been seriously injured. And I recalled vividly that it took my parents 7 years to pay for the hospital bills for a colt that kicked me, which I slapped the colt in the wrong place and he kicked me. Okay, so at any rate, I recall that, and I think that fascinated me with the needs and healthcare and this thing. So with it, I learned a lot. There were people, Jim Fowler, that was an exceptional man who gave his life to healthcare. He became fascinated with it, and he chaired certain divisions of it. And so with a meeting that was called by, I think, you can get 150 different versions of this, by Bernie Brown and Richard Hubbard, both the administrators, to discuss building a laundry together to save money. And in this meeting, we were all sitting around the table, and we were looking at each other like enemies, to begin with, and we want to make sure this is a fair share. And they was thinking that bunch in South Cobb, watch them. And of course, I lived in Marietta, but they were thinking that Marietta crowd, we got to worry. But we had someone that I had mentioned earlier that made the statement that, this makes so much sense that we combine. And we then started discussing it. To make an extremely long story, because this went on for a long time, we decided to merge, and the final decision was Kennestone, I give them all the credit in the world, agreed that we would have an equal number of board members when we merged. And then with that merger, it was tremendous, the savings that we had. And of course, even during this period, and this is something that many people miss, we were so successful because we were, I think, so down to earth. And these people, these leaders, all had one thing in mind, saving money. But saving money to plow it back in to the healthcare system for the best equipment, to do what you can do in the best manner possible. And this went on, and we were becoming successful to the point that we drew attention in Atlanta. And with this was born Prillaman, a mistake. There'll be people who get a little upset with me, but it was a mistake. I was put on that board. And wonderful people. We knew some of the most wonderful people from the other health systems, but it didn't fit. And it just, we tried, and I never missed a meeting for over 5 years, and stayed in every kind of war you could be in, because it got down to that was really not the way we wanted to go. And I'm not going to say who was right or wrong. It didn't fit. Our job was simply this: we're here to serve Cobb County. If we could do it better by forming a coalition in Atlanta, fine. At about that same time, we met with, and I'm not sure that I believe that the commission chair was Bill Burns, I think, at that time. And we sat down with him, and of course, they had been giving funds to the health system, and we relieved the county of giving us funds that we felt that we could operate and not be a tax burden and give excellent health care. So coming out of Prillaman, we also, and that's true to this date, they did not fund us by law. You know, they would have to at least address some of the issues, but we don't have to do it for incident care. Gosh, those are tremendous. But of course, WellStar today handles more incident care than anybody, and if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty, Kennestone is, whatever year it is, will be 1 or 2 alone in the state in incident care. So besides the economics of what transpired with this, to have the headquarters of one of the most prestigious now health care systems, the economics is unbelievable, the jobs, everything that this is given. But let me say this. I had never worked with any group on anything who cared more about health care than the trustees that I had the great pleasure of working with, and I'll even include the prominent board that I served on behalf of WellStar in Atlanta. These are people that cared, evaluated, reacted, and always with integrity. And that's something that to the day I die, I will value being with a group that cared that much. And also, for this dumb old boy, I learned a great deal from all of these people. Just, you couldn't hardly go to a meeting where it was very competitive without learning.
What was the year of the merger? Do you remember where Cobb Hospital and Kennestone merged? Do you remember what period that was?
Gosh, I'm
We can go back.
you better get that because I'm mixing up Prominent and all that in it now.
So here I got, okay, after the merger,
Yes.
Wellstar experienced over a period of time incredible growth.
Yes.
What do you attribute that to?
Okay. I think the growth can be attributed to several things. And I don't know what order they should be in. I've often wondered myself this because it wasn't like we didn't have competition. I mean, I don't want to give you that feeling because we did, and we had keen competition. One of the things was that there was a bonding, again, for the lack of a better word, a bonding of the physicians, staff, and the trustees. In other words, about 40% of the trustees were physicians. But in my experience, even when I was chairing Wellstar, I did not see selfishness prevail. So one of the factors, big factor, was the fact that the physicians were on board, let's do the right thing, let's build. Now, it was good for them too, security. It gave them a place to operate of value, and that's why from a distance you saw other things that happened in healthcare that were monumental. Number one, lawsuits had a terrible effect on many physicians during that period of time. And so many left their practices and joined Wellstar because they would have protection under our insurance plan. There actually were surgeons who have told me that their practice, they could not really make any money because of their cost of insurance, and that was one reason. Then the second part of it was unique. And this goes back, I don't know who to give the credit to. Well, it certainly wasn't me, but it would be a number of people had the vision of, look, let's go out and really have our own physicians. Let's go bring them in here. Oh, we can work with physicians and all kind, and we do. But let's have our own physicians. Oh, that had a tremendous effect, still has a tremendous effect. It's just unbelievable how much strength that gave and how much they passed on. And then I think, let's add to this. There were trustees who spent time really studying what was transpiring. When I say that, I mean they went into details of what should we be building now? Where should we be expanding? How do we do it? What are the economics? And to many, I'm not being critical now at all, but many health systems, not many in Georgia, but they didn't have people that put that kind of depth into the study. You could go to a trustee and you could get a pretty good feel for the demographics. You'd get a good feel for the economics. You could get all of that rather quickly, and it made decision making pretty easy. And one of the most important factors is that the authority hospitals, the board of trustees, are individuals that are not real. They're appointed, and they keep politics out of the health system.
Okay. Ty, where did you get down?
Yeah, I did not do number three.
Okay. This one, I'll just tell you ahead of time. What's the single biggest decision that you're aware of that had an impact on Cobb? And compare it to the Braves. What was the big thing? And I'll give you a second to think about it, and then I'm gonna go upstairs and I've got an interview to do myself with the Marietta Daily Journal. But describe fork in the road situation, or several of them. Those are right. Those are really good ones. We could have gone here.
Mhm.
We could have gone here.
Yeah.
And I'll be right back. I'll do like I did last time. I'll just be outside listening. And when we have a break, be right back. Those are good, by the way. I just learned something listening to you.
Well, I don't know. Is this what you want? Okay.
We
You
want-
sure?
We want stories.
Okay.
And see, what we'll do is while you're talking,
Yeah.
we'll go to pictures.
Yeah. Okay.
And you got
I
got
think
pictures of those hospitals.
I think I have pictures of them. Yeah. Sure.
so
all those
Okay.
people you
Yeah.
mentioned,
like Bernie
Right.
Bernie, you know.
Oh yeah.
People love those old pictures.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Well, yeah. I'll go through that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We got some more. In a minute, Tots, it's not on there. I want him to talk about his wife and the role of wife.
Oh yeah.
That-
I would.
Yeah, we should do that.
We should-
I'll be glad to. Yeah.
His wife wouldn't come. I was going to get them together.
Yeah. She turned me
No,
down.
we should
Yeah.
really- we should really
We should
lean
start
into that
doing
hard,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the single decision that has had the biggest impact on Cobb, and how would you compare it to the Braves? What was kind of the Braves stadium of the past?
Yeah. I supported bringing the Braves to Cobb. I still think it was the right thing to do. And I think that it's sort of confirmed with how upset Atlanta got over it. That if it hadn't been of value, I don't think they would have been near as upset. But anyway, that's ridiculous to say, but there is some truth to it. That, of course, the Braves economically should be tremendous for years to come. If you're looking at it purely economically, from the local point of view, at some point it becomes a plus. I think it also is important economically, the Braves that is, from worldwide. People say Cobb County. That's where the Braves, their home of the Braves is in Cobb County. I think that it's important to have great education. That's the first thing people are going to look at coming in. And things like the Braves and the arts and everything is very important. And this complex, I think, is something that will be of value many years from now. I think that was a turning point. I think also that one of the things that is of great value is the tax structure in Cobb County, and I think that has been a turn in the road in many areas. I would say that a good deal of the commissioners that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years understood that trying to be as debt-free as you could and pay as you go in many areas is so valuable that one has a problem in defining it. Really, it's virtually everything. Now, I do think that the crossroads now is different from the crossroads prior to this. I think that from an economic point of view and from an affluent county such as Cobb, that there's a real need to fund as we go and not be afraid of a small increase in taxes or anything. And I know that's something that most people disagree with. I certainly wouldn't want it to affect the small homeowners and this sort of thing. No, but I would say that's something that's coming now that we have to address, but it was addressed well in the past, and that was something of great value. I think that if I were looking at events that were key, I would put in that category Splots. How important that's been. I believe it was 1998. I'm not sure of that date, but Splots had failed in Cobb County. Went to a vote and it failed. And it shocked a lot of people because this was money going to our schools, going for our education, which we were very proud of in Cobb, and most of us that I knew supported it. Johnny Isaacson and I co-chaired a new Splots. Senator now, Isaacson, he wasn't then. And that was one of the great educations for me about Cobb County. If you go out and explain it to people, the value, give them details, give them a forum. You may not like the forum, so they'll jump on you pretty quick. And that's good. That's what you should do. And if you can't answer it, you shouldn't be co-chairing it. So, but I think that is one of the major accomplishments in Cobb County. I know there were some who, it was sort of a crossroads after it lost, that really wanted to wait 5-6 years before going back. Would have been a disaster for our school systems and our tax base in general, I think. Now there are people that certainly are better equipped to address that than I, but I always considered that just a major crossroads. The other crossroad is one of, again, I didn't know the people, but you study your county and learn, and that was the beginning of Kennesaw State University. You know, when this was first started as a 2-year school, there were a group of people in Marietta who were working to get the school started. And they had to make decisions. And I've been told that there were discussions on, well, what do we name this? What do we call this? And unselfishly, they said, let's name it Kennesaw. Let's name it Kennesaw, not Marietta. We want to spread it out. That was a great decision. That decision helped with people like Betty Siegel, that was wonderful in that school, and most of the people that have headed it up just done a great job. But that was a major decision, unselfish, and again, a little bit of telling the tale of good people in this county. And I think that was a crossroads too. From a personal point of view, it has astonished me how much people will respond. I want to mention someone that I admire now and did over the years, who, when you came to a crossroads on anything that was being considered in this county, Kessel Stellings, got to mention him. He was always there, knew what he was talking about, wanted to do the right thing for the people, and he responded. And that could go into, I could not tell you the number of projects that were important that he was a part of. The parks here. Virtually anything I was part of, Salvation Army Drive, God, the decisions made at the chamber. His was always the one that I knew had been thought out. And to me, it was just great. It was just great. So if you had a project and you went to Kessel Stellings, you had somebody on your team to begin with. You were way ahead, and that's what I think is so important. I think Cobb has been able, because of those people like that, in doing so many good things.
What about when we talk about kind of fork in the road situations? We could have gone there, we could have gone there. We asked that question to Roy Barnes, and he talked about how the night that he brought, the names escape me because we've talked to so many people, but he brought people over to his house, and they basically sat at his kitchen table and they drafted what I think would become T-Splost, and they wrote it in longhand just sitting around their kitchen table. Do you have any moments that you were involved in where you can kind of say, like, this is a moment where we made a real change in this county, and can you kind of take us into the room or take us into the lunch or the meeting where that happened? Or
Yeah, let me cite something that I think has some value. This county at times, as you mentioned, in that there are people that would go out of their way when there was something of real value, of concern, that needed to be addressed, that you didn't know which way it would go, or in many cases you were scared to death what the results would be. I would say that in some of the tax structures, CIDs, things of that sort, that there were always meetings, private meetings. They were here, virtually everywhere. Some of them extremely tough. I would give John Williams a great deal of credit.
we talked to him.
Oh, you have? Okay. John Williams did so much in meetings such as this. I can recall him several times that we'd be together and looking at things that were of value. Now, he always came in orderly, knew what he was talking about, and was action-oriented. It was never, let's meet another 2 or 3, let's get this done tomorrow, let's meet this weekend. Some of those things were had to do with, certainly with taxes, roads, things like that. Specifically, I would say he was instrumental in many decisions that had to do with finding a way to work around problems, funds, or whatever was needed. I don't know of anything that I would say was earth-shaking or one of the major ones. But I would say that when you took the people like John Williams or Earl Smith and people like this, you always came out with what you thought was the best solution. And I'm sure that with Roy Barnes and people like that, same thing was transpiring, because I think that was the key. I never, this is not a crossroads, but it's something along that line that emphasizes what I'm trying to say. I recall Betty Siegel, Dr. Siegel, volunteered me to head up a Salvation Army campaign to build a building here, needed. And really and truly, I didn't know anything about the Salvation Army, and I didn't know much about where to go. But I sat in a meeting with a number of people, Kessel Stellings, Tom Hill, people like that, people from Wellstar, Carastar, all those. And I told them that this was something that was really needed, and the kids that were just in dire need of the facilities that they were giving. After several meetings and heated discussions about how to go about it, we came to a solution. And 25 corporations joined in the effort because of this meeting. We had 3 individuals that learned about it, that came in with big checks. And one of those individuals, 9/11, replenished the budget of the Salvation Army that was sent to 9/11. That, to me, is the kind of action that you could get on virtually any issue. Now, I'm not trying to say that everybody went in there and patted each other on the back. Far from it. Far from it. That's another strength in Cobb County. You get with a group. There's no yes people. They're going to respond to what they think is right. So that would be the best way for me to explain that.
Okay, that's good stuff. We talked to Johnny Williams, and he said he had he was having a barbecue at his house, and I forget the name, but some senator came to his house, and he said, "Now the senator's coming. We need you to have a fifth of whiskey and a whole bunch of M&Ms set aside for him." And they have a barbecue, and the senator's there. And do you know the name?
You know, I'm not sure. I think I don't know. I don't know why I'm saying that. I think it was for Johnny Isaacson.
I think he was involved, but it's not the senator. I think this was back in like the 80s or something. I don't think it was Johnny Isaacson.
Okay, all right, okay.
But anyway, but he said, you know, the senator's coming. The senator demands a fifth of whiskey and a whole bunch of M&Ms set aside. And they go out there and they have some kind of, there's some big naval mess up and everything. The senator has to go in his office and take calls and everything. And he's in there for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And the senator has to come out and give a speech. And there's like 1,000 people at this barbecue and everything. And John Williams looked in the office, and the whiskey was all drank, and all the M&Ms.
Oh, I remember. I wasn't there. No, I've been to several there, but that that's great. Yeah. That's a great story. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of stories like that? Maybe not about a drunk senator, but any kind of crazy stories that most people just would never know if they didn't talk to you?
Well, I would go back to one individual that. Just blew my mind. That is something along that line. I was getting ready for a board meeting at Wellstar and sitting outside going over my notes before I went in for the meeting. And this fella came up, and I had not met him. He was going to come on the board, and I had looked at this and didn't know him, and he came in and he saw me sitting there, and the first thing he did, he said, "What are you doing?" Hadn't even introduced himself or anything, and I said, "Well, I'm getting ready for the board meeting," and we shook hands. And he said, "Well, what's all this other stuff you got here?" And he said, "What are you doing with that?" And I thought, well, gosh, who is this guy? I mean, I need a little time here. I'm trying to get away. And I said, I'm working. I'm chair of a campaign to raise money for the Salvation Army. Well, how you gonna do that? And I began to wonder, what kind of smart guy is this that I can't even get a word in here? And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to go to major businesses here, and I think they'll all support. They're not going to support you. Well, golly, I'm thinking, I got a wild man out here. We're about to induct into the board here. And I said, well, I think they will. And he said, what you gonna do with the money? And I said, are they gonna build a building? What's gonna be in the building? Well, he drills me. Now, I've got people that have come in now while this is going on, waiting for me to come in. And I told him, I said, you have to excuse me. I said, I've got to go in. Man, you can't go in there yet. We've got to solve this. I don't know what we're solving. I don't even know what's going on. Now there's one guy has come out and said, we're ready, we're ready, you know. And I said, okay, just a minute. Guy looks at me and he said, you don't mind waiting right here, man, I need to go to my car. Okay. He goes to his car, comes back in, and he said, I'm going to join you. Said, I'm part of your campaign. Okay. Now, I'm really trying to find a way to get away and let me escape right then, you know. They've come back out the second time trying to get me in, and he's writing stuff on a paper. So he walks in to the board meeting. We're getting ready to start, and he said, wait just a minute. He walks over, and he hands me a $30,000 check, which I did not believe was good. I didn't know him. And then he gave me a list of names. And he said, I want you to write all these people in the morning, tell them what we're doing. And I said, okay. I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'll do this. He followed me to the car, and he went back through the whole thing, and I guess I spent, I got home and told my wife, I said, man, you wouldn't believe what happened tonight. I said, this fella, I said, he's a nice guy. And that was the beginning of my knowledge of the Tom Phillips that I was telling you about, which he had, all of us did not realize how brilliant he was, but he has that way about him. And of course, virtually anything you do with him, there is something humorous about it. There are people who to this day believe that Tom and I own a pig farm in Alabama. And Tom has told people that the pigs got a disease and we had to sell them quick on the market before the federal government came in. And that went around politically, and he told politicians that we couldn't give them money, but we could furnish hams and this thing. The guy has a great sense of humor, but does wonderful things. So he ended up being one of my best friends, but I've always thought that's one of the most humorous things that ever happened. I could not get him off my back that night.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I didn't laugh because it would pick up, but that's a
Yeah.
good story. I like that. I guess he's probably coming in soon, but I guess we'll get started. Have there cities and counties and the role of Marietta and the role of the media?
Oh, it's improved. It has really improved over the years. There were times that in the past, and I didn't understand it, but I knew that there were people who were ugly, friends that were ugly even about the press in many things that I was involved with, Chamber being one of them. I couldn't quite understand what it was, but I recall this would have been about 1997 that I had worked with a number of people in the chamber and had asked that there be a real effort to communicate with the media, very important to us, And for everybody to understand, the media reports facts. They don't give a toot about personalities and this sort of thing, which I admire. That's the way it should be. If you can't take the heat, don't be in there. Just, that's what it's about. And we did make a lot of progress that year. And since then, and I don't know who to credit it to, but the communication is much better in the press today than I've ever seen it. Certainly, I think the Marietta Daily Journal does a great job in reporting. It's not always what someone here at the chamber, or as people used to say in anger, that chamber bunch. That was the name that was given a bunch of us. I don't see that anymore. Now the cities, that's cities and their communication, I think is much, much better than it was. I would say that when you look at, and this goes beyond the cities into the commissioners and whatever, I think it's much better today than it was at times. There were certain areas of the county at times that there was a little bit of resentment. South Cobb had some, I think, resentments about getting their shares and whatever. I don't see that anymore. I think that is something that has been worked out. I think from what I know and the mayors I know, that they are really and truly open to discussion, and I think that the cities themselves do a lot of good when they get together. I've not seen anything really negative like it could be. I mean, there is a natural tendency for you all working to get what you can. So.
Okay. We talked about Otis Brumby.
Yes.
People, do you have anything to say about?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I really enjoyed Otis Brumby Sr. And maybe, I don't know how to say this. Otis was a person that I always felt that if you discussed a project with him, if you discussed what you were doing with him, he may not agree with you, but he'd give you a fair shake. But if you didn't do that, or if he didn't think you was giving him all the facts, then he'll get out of your way. He gets you. I always enjoyed. I've been to his office when we were on the same side. I've been to his office on issues that he disagreed on in a number of areas. But he always treated me fairly. I never experienced anything, and his son is just tremendous. Otis Brumby Jr. is, I just think he's perfect. He's anything that young man does will be done well. He's exceptional, and I know his dad would really be proud of him today. But I always, now I had a lot of people would call me and tell me, said, now, I believe you can talk to Otis. And I would try to explain to him, look, you go down and sit down with him and tell him the truth and just put the facts out, you'll get a fair shake. And but he was an intricate part, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of people might think this is overstated, but I think that the Marietta Daily Journal and the fact that Otis Sr. was something of a watchdog it did put people on alert, and I think that in many ways the county was better for it. Now, I never did see any kind of malice at all. We had a situation at Wellstar. I'll tell you this quick story. And I was going down to Otis's office and discussing. And the fellow that I certainly won't call his name, but I was going down with, mentioned to me, said, "Don't worry about this, I'll handle it." And when we got into the office, I think about this often, had his conference desk completely full. He had researched everything you can imagine. He knew more about the subject we were in there to discuss than we did, the people who had presented it to us. And of course, I think about 20 minutes into the conversation, he had run this guy completely out of the room. That was it. And you know what? I was on his side. I thought, well, you know, this is great. We've got somebody that is really doing a job with this.
That's great. That's great. Have you heard about the relationship with the state?
Oh, I think that certainly in recent years, it's been very good. There's no secret that I support the Lieutenant Governor, have forever. And the reason is that I've never been to the state, and I had one situation where we were looking at a CON issue, and I was at the state level, and this was a meeting that had something to do with it, and we had everybody just about in a tizzy over what we were trying to do, and the Lieutenant Governor had been kind enough to say, "Come down. I'll try to get you to people that you need to talk with. I'm not going to try to influence this. I want you to have a shot." And we were down there, and I caught a lot of flack for this, but we had a guy, and I won't call that hospital name or anything, that just came over and gave us a tremendously difficult time. And in doing that, he said to me, and I didn't know the guy, and he said to me, he said, "We're really against Wellstar and what you're doing." And he's just going in this rage, you know, and I mean, the guy was really being ugly. And I was so fed up with it, and I shouldn't have done this, but I did. I hugged him. I just decided I'd do something crazy, and I hugged him, and I told him, while I was hugging him, I said, I'm from your hospital. I agree with you." The guy stepped back and said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I can't get along with him either." Well, everybody went in shock. They were dying laughing. I thought that was the end of it. And of course, the guy goes over and gets somebody from the health system, comes back over and says, "What do you do at our hospital?" And I didn't know what to say then. A bad joke had just completely turned on me. And I did the only thing I knew to do, and I said, "That's exactly what's wrong with our hospital today. You don't even know me." I said, "Forget it." And with that, I left. Well, needless to say, and I didn't go back to the Capitol for a while because I felt like I was a little bit out of place. Seriously, Casey Cagle and many others at the state level, the Lindsay Tippins, so many of these people have supported us in every way. The door is open to us. We get a good hearing. We may not like some of the things that are going to transpire, but it's really been a pleasure to work with them. And I think that if I were defining it as to what it was at one time, I would say that our communication level at the state level is the highest now that I've seen in my experience, work experience.
Very cool, very cool.
Let me, hey, just in time, let me fix your.
Oh my goodness! All right,
No,
good,
no.
good.
Fix your microphone. just
Oh
a
my
little.
gosh, I'm dragging it down.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
All right. Okay.
You done?
I did single decisions, strike fork in the road moment, cities and counties, role of media, and relationship with the state.
Okay. All right. This is an important question. You better get this right or you'll be in big trouble.
All right.
Um, people who do great things can't do so without a supportive spouse.
Oh.
So, I want you to take a moment and describe what your wife has done to help you, which is probably indicative of other spouses that are part of this story.
That's easy. I have truly been blessed. It's that simple. I've been married 64 years. Now that's a long time. I have been supported 64 years. I don't know that people understand that, maybe to a fault. I always had an interest, particularly in Cobb County. And I also enjoyed so much the fellowship, the feeling of maybe you're doing something right. But none of that could have happened without my wife, Lil. Just that simple. She did not, nor does she complain about, well, are you going to another meeting? I didn't hear that. I had friends that heard it. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear the problems of, my gosh, you're going on this retreat for how long? I didn't hear any of that. I heard simply the support of doing. She wanted me to do what I wanted to do. She also knew that in some weird way, and that, Lord, a lot of people would confirm the weird way, that I was enjoying this, and I felt that it was a part of it. I would say that, add this to it. I've been in many, many situations that required some decision making that I wasn't totally comfortable with. But I could go to Lil, and I got an honest effort from her heart. I got the right direction to go. And it made me more effective. And it gave me a comfort that I value above anything else in my life. It's a miracle, 64 years to begin with. In fact, you even lived that long. It's pretty much of a miracle. But to have had that support, and of course, it goes in so many ways. Even when I was officer of a company and on boards throughout the United States, that's travel. She raised those kids. I love the kids, and I like to think I did a little something with raising them, but I know down deep that Lil raised the kids and gave them the values that we see they have today. It was her, not me. I could not, I can't imagine even being a a part of anything that was of value to me that she did not support me, and that led to being something of value.
Last question. That's good, by the way. And Ty, we might want to just strip that off so he can show it to his wife.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, let's do it.
Dear.
That's it. Yeah.
We'll be on the special cut of it.
Right.
Okay,
Because,
yeah.
Ty's going. Obviously, we may do a 30-minute version.
Yeah,
a
oh, yeah,
version,
yeah.
something. Describe when your children are successful, you feel so proud.
Yeah.
When you drive around Cobb County and look at what we've become, a lot of that is because of a handful of people just like you. And you're trying to be modest, but you know this is true. Describe the pride you had when you ride around and see the prosperity, people walking along, balls being thrown to the plate,
Yep.
Soccer balls kicked.
Yep.
It wouldn't have happened without a handful of godfathers. So talk a little bit about the pride you have today and what you've created, or what you're a part of creating.
It's everything. It's what makes you tick. It's so easy to say yes when I look around Cobb. I'm so proud. But I guess that I have a weird, you notice I've used weird several times. Okay, here it is again. When I go to KSU, I don't see the buildings, I see the students. Particularly the nursing school. When I see those kids that are getting an education because people made the right decisions, many of them gave money, but beyond that, this is not about money. It goes far beyond money. It's giving of oneself. It's caring and it's responding. I go to Wellstar. I see nurses and the staff that care. I see doctors that have done so much beyond what you would expect. I see the trustees, a group of people that care. And I see Candace Saunders, who I'm a big supporter of, who is orderly and just brilliant. Just orderly and brilliant. And then you go out to see things that were tough decisions that people made, and you can't help but just see that, this is really good. I don't mean myself individually, I mean all of us, but for me, I like to sit there and I think, I've been a part of some things that are good. This is not usual. This is not going to be spread everywhere. This is unique right here. It's good.
Doesn't this make you feel like your life was worthwhile?
Absolutely.
Just say those words.
Absolutely. It's what is the difference in your life. I cannot imagine. I just really can't imagine being in a community and not being involved in ways like you see. And that goes into everything. If I go, this probably doesn't even fit with this, but if I see the chamber, I don't see the building. I see what it's done. I see what it's responded to and what that has done. What that has addressed. We saw, we got 100 people coming over here. Oh, come on. It's what was built, how it was built. And the people behind it, to know some of them, and gosh, we could We could stay here all day and name them because they're there. It's the value of what you are looking at in the nth degree is what I get out of a great pleasure in this county.
All right, I got the most important question of all.
Oh, Lord.
See how we're okay on time?
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes young people don't listen to old people because we're old.
Yep.
And sometimes people middle-aged, I maybe call myself middle-aged, don't listen to the godfathers of the past. What advice would you offer to people who are getting to a position of making things happen? Based on your experience, what would you want to tell them?
I would simply say commit yourself to something of value, but I'd go much further than that. One of the great pleasures I had at the chamber years ago was Leadership Cobb. We would have groups that we would speak to. They'd come to your house then, and you would talk with them. And I would have questions about, well, why should I get into this? And you can go through the obvious. Oh, you're helping people. You're doing a wonderful thing. You're great. No. You're being part of a community and you're making it better, and you are addressing that which can be passed on and enhance the lives of those that follow you. That's what it's about. But you've got to commit. And the other part of it is, don't just commit to get it on your resume. That's important. I've done it. Commit only to something that you see the value and something that you can contribute to, that you can do something that makes it better. It doesn't have to be money, but it has to be something that you have spent the time on to understand and to address, and most important, put integrity and honesty above it all. There is nothing of value that you're going to get out of any organization or anything you do if that isn't what you have as your top priority. And if you do that, life's better.
So, one last question. Who were your mentors? And these are people long gone.
Yeah,
But when you were a young whippersnapper, you had to have at least one or two people to help give you advice.
I did. I would start with my dad. I'm different from him. I'd love to tell you that I'm just like my dad. I wish I were. My dad was a laborer on the railroad. And life was tough. And I could see him when, in the summer, coming in from work, overalls on, and the body salt all the way through the overalls from the sweat, from out there laboring. Yes, I noticed that, but I also saw something else. I saw a smile. I saw a smile when he saw us. I saw someone who I don't believe that he knew how to really be ugly about anything. It was not his nature. It just wasn't there. And he had the innate ability, no education. My mother taught him to read so he could become a foreman up in age. And I saw him lead by action as much as anybody I've ever known. He just simply wanted to do the right thing. And he did it, so I admired him to no end. I've often been in situations that I'd make a decision that I thought I was probably going to catch the devil about, and somewhere I would find comfort in thinking, well, if my dad had done this, it would have been the right thing, and he'd be okay and smile about it. And I hope that I've been able to do that. I admired him more than anyone that I ever knew. When he died in an accident a month before he was going to retire. And people from all along the route that the railroad that he worked came to that funeral. All of them basically saying what I just said. He wouldn't have known the meaning of integrity, but he was what it is. So I got a great deal from just observing and being with him. I guess this will surprise you. When I first went to Carastar Industries, there was they gave me a division, and there was some work that was done outside. And I was just starting out, trying to make a buck, advance. But I noticed that much of this was rough work outside then. It's much easier now, better now. But I noticed that he was on an outside baler, and no matter what the weather was, every time I walked by this guy, he was smiling and he was asking me how I'm doing and all of this. And if I'd have been in his place, I'd have been looking for a job, number one, to get out of that cold. And so one day I stopped and I asked him, I said, how's everything going? And he told me. It was always fine, you know, and I asked him, I said, well, what would you like to do? I was thinking about getting him out of that cold job. He says, I can't. I don't have an education. And I said, well, maybe we can do something about it. No, I've got kids now. I have to take care of them. I don't have time for that. To make a long story short, I got him another job. He went on to become foreman in that department until he died. But he took that favor of working with him, and I just, now those kids have finished college. I hear from them. Something about his humble way and something about what he was giving inspired me, and I put him up the list. You probably thought I'd say it would be some industrialist or something. No, it was a worker, and I've never forgotten that. Just recently heard from one of the daughters that would be my second. But listen, I've been inspired by a lot of people.
So, you okay on space?
Yeah, 40 minutes.
Okay, well, we won't take that long. And take a drink of water.
Oh, okay.
This next one is you and I at lunch.
Yeah.
We're talking war stories.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in documentaries that I think Ty's more of an expert than I am by a long shot, but war stories are what keeps people. What attracts people to material. The most valuable thing I have today is a video just like this that they made of my father.
Oh yeah.
2 months before he died.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's a little historical society in Nashville, Georgia.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know it was done. And after he died at 95, I was contacted. And his whole video was mostly about war stories. And you know what I mean by war stories.
Oh yeah.
That they define.
They define your life, really, in many ways.
So Can you think of one that you might? I don't want to rush you. So is there?
Okay.
The one we talked about lunch day might be kind of interesting. I don't know if that's the big guys gonna come beat your butt.
Oh, yeah. Let me. You'll probably cut this out because I don't think this means much to anybody but me. But I was on a panel once, and I was asked the question, what would I call one of the defining moments in my life, and how did it change? And I had two of them, but one of them I won't give you, but I'll give you this one. Growing up in the mountains, and I defined that we were poor. We had a first grade going to school. We had one young man that was our friend that we didn't know it in first grade, but he had some mental problems, and we didn't recognize it. And we went on to the second grade and the third grade, and of course he didn't come up with us. But we stayed in touch. We played ball and all this together. As we grew and got into high school, he had still continued to go everywhere that we went. Even sometime we put him in the trunk when we were going on dates, and he went in the trunk with us everywhere. I mean, it was just unreal. And of course, we're all getting up to where we're either going in the Army or to school or something. And I had become tremendously aggressive from a business point of view. We talked a little bit about it, and that was my top priority. Get out of my way. I'm going to be successful or die trying. I'm going. And this small church, I got a call, and my mother had passed away. And we were worried about getting back into the Blue Ridge Mountains for the burial. We got up there, and in this church, we were sitting in the room the family sits before they go in for the funeral. And the lady there in the church came in and motioned to me. Said, "Would you come out here a minute?" I walked out, and there he was. I hadn't seen him in 15 years. There was about a foot of snow on the ground, and he had been placed in a home doing some work, and he had learned about my mother passing away, and he had got out and walked 1.5 miles in where you could hardly get out in the ice and everything to come to that funeral, standing there with his rubber boots melting, the ice all from him, virtually ice on his body. And I said to him, "My gosh, why are you here?" And I was really worried about him. I knew that was the weather and the way he'd come. And he looked at me and he said, "I had to be here. You're my friend." Changed my life. And I made a pledge to myself. Sometimes I do that and don't keep them. But I made a pledge I did keep. That guy gave me as much as anybody's ever given me. He gave me the value of giving what you have. He couldn't afford flowers for that funeral. He didn't even have anybody to bring him to the funeral. He had nothing. But he gave me a feeling that I'd never had before nor since. And that changed my life. That's a situation that changed everything I did from then on in giving or working with an organization.
Boy, that's a great way to end.
No, that's good.
That's
Yeah,
powerful.
but that's a true story.
Is there anything else you want to say while we have a camera on you?
No, Lord, no, y'all dug it out.
Well, I'm going to ask one more then.
What's that?
This is not going to be true of Boy Barnes and others, but let's suppose 20 years from now, one of your great-grandkids or great-great-grandkids, and you and I both long gone, what would you want to say to them? If they're watching this video, what would you want to tell the next generation that you're a part of creating?
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you want to tell them?
I would simply say, number one, do what makes you happy as the first consideration, and not what amount of money you're going to make. And whatever you do it with integrity. Know what the value is, and don't be doing anything but just for what will make you feel good and be of value. And then you will find happiness immediately. That's what it is. It's satisfaction. And I would hope they had that above all else. The rest of it just doesn't matter.
Said another way, when people are on their deathbed, they don't sit there and say, gosh, I wish I'd been at the office more often.
You got
You know?
that. That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
You know, that is so important. And the thing that I've learned over the years, the things that please me the most is where I felt like I was a part of something that had some value and that it would sustain itself. And the thing that bothers me today is, of course, growing up, the movies, you always knew who the good guy was. And they influenced you. And that's sort of the way I feel about anything now. Whatever you're going to do, it's going to be tough. The kids will have tough times. All of us have tough times. But you hope that being involved in whatever way you can is a highway to finding what you need and peace of mind. And that's happiness. I mean, the rest of it, good gosh.
Good. I'm going to tell you a quick story. You don't need to put this on it, but
Yeah.
my wife was having a birthday.